When embarking on digital transformations, there's a couple different ways you can approach your technology strategy. You can either build the software you want or you can buy it. There's pros and cons to each, and I'm going to talk about what those are here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent technology agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm also part of Lander Talent, which provides ERP and IT staffing for organizations going through digital transformations. And decades ago, there was a movement towards custom technology. Before ERP systems and off-the-shelf software became prominent, customers oftentimes built their own technology as a source of competitive advantage. Over time, though, they found that those technologies were becoming obsolete, outdated, expensive, hard to maintain, and the advent of off-the-shelf ERP systems like SAP, Oracle had ERP systems, Microsoft, and a number of other ERP vendors made it a lot easier and more appealing in many ways to buy software. However, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for organizations. And as we're seeing in today's day and age, there are distinct pros and cons to both approaches, and companies need to be aware of what those pros and cons are and fully consider those options before embarking on their digital strategies. So what I want to do today is talk about what the pros and cons are of the build versus buy debate. And at the end of the video, I'll give you some guidance on how to choose the right strategy that makes the most sense for your organization. If you're leading a digital transformation or ERP initiative, and you want to avoid the costly mistakes that most organizations make, that's where Third Stage Consulting comes in. We are an independent and technology advisory firm, meaning that we don't sell software, we don't take commissions from vendors. Our only job is to protect your interests and be on your side. We help executives and project teams plan, deliver, and recover digital transformations and ERP projects, reducing risk, improving adoption, and delivering real business value. If you want clarity before you commit to your digital strategy, or if something feels off track to you, feel free to reach out to us at thirdstage-consulting.com, and my team and I would be happy to help. Let's start with where we are here in the mid-2020s. Most organizations we work with come in with a off-the-shelf or buy-first sort of mentality. They come in with the expectation that they are going to buy off-the-shelf software that can provide best practices, that can provide standard functionality, and provide an ease of use and an ease of development that you don't find with custom developed software. Now, this has been the model for the last 20 years, I'd say. It's been a very stable model that has worked well for organizations. But what has happened in recent years are a few trends that are exposing more limitations of the whole off-the-shelf buy scenario in the build versus buy debate. First of all, and potentially foremost, most ERP vendors are moving their solutions from on-premise to the cloud. And not only are they moving it to the cloud, they're also moving it to multi-tenant or software as a service types of cloud solutions, which both models entail less flexibility than what customers once had back when they had on-premise systems. Now, this is a good model for software vendors because they can scale their software, they can provide the same solution to more customers. There's less maintenance required on the customer's behalf. And for the vendors, it locks you into a contract with steady recurring annual revenue that they didn't have before in the old on-premise model. However, what it's doing is it's exposing the lack of flexibility that these solutions have. Inevitably, every organization we work with that's deploying some sort of cloud solution finds that there are fairly significant limitations in what the software can do. And it's not an indictment on the software vendor products themselves. It's just the reality of every business, every organization being different, and the impossibility of any organization trying to look and act just like every other organization that uses that same software. So the reality is this movement to the cloud is actually making the whole buy scenario slightly less appealing than it once was. The other trends that we're seeing that are making the whole buy scenario less appealing are the fact that now it's a lot easier to develop software. Back in the day, 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was extremely cost prohibitive and time prohibitive and completely unrealistic for most organizations to build their own custom applications across the board. Today, however, with vibe coding and AI tools and even platform solutions that I'm going to come back and talk about later in the video, it's making the barriers to entry a lot lower. It's making it so that more organizations are able to take advantage of some of the custom types of solutions that are out there. And then you add to the fact that open source ERP solutions are making it easier to start with a off-the-shelf system that you can then tailor and customize and build around to tailor to your specific needs. All these trends are pointing in the direction of potentially more of a pendulum swing away from off-the-shelf software back towards custom development. And finally, cost is one other disadvantage of cloud solutions that are off the shelf. The costs of cloud systems are more expensive than on-prem. Companies now are locking themselves into perpetual licenses and subscriptions that will cost them more money year over year than it once did when they had on-premise and they were just paying for their maintenance and support fees. So those cost barriers are something that will create long-term blowback and pushback against the off-the-shelf model. Having said all of this, though, the buy scenario is still the most common in the build versus buy debate, at least amongst our customers. But what I want to do next is talk about the appeal of the other side of the equation, or the other side of the debate, which is the whole build or the whole custom development side of technology. Before off-the-shelf technology became as prominent as it is here in the 2020s, custom development was actually very common. You had a lot of organizations and internal IT shops that developed their own applications. In many cases, it was simply because there wasn't off-the-shelf software available to do whatever function they needed. In other cases, organizations were viewing IT as a competitive advantage. In more recent years and decades, however, with the advent of more modern off-the-shelf technologies and the advent of big power players in the ERP space like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, Salesforce, and Workday as well, we're seeing that more organizations are finding the convenience in deploying off-the-shelf software. However, as I mentioned in the previous segment, as flexibility becomes lower and cost becomes higher for these off-the-shelf solutions, and with the advent of vibe coding, open source software, platform as a service, and other technology movements, we're seeing that the off-the-shelf buy scenario doesn't look quite as appealing as it once did, at least not to customers. It certainly does to vendors more than ever. It looks a lot more appealing to vendors, but not so much to customers. And so now organizations are looking at the option of what do we do to potentially give ourselves some sort of competitive advantage with technology, knowing that the off-the-shelf software is becoming more and more commoditized, more and more homogeneous, to the point where now we've got to figure out how we can differentiate ourselves. And one of the ways you can differentiate yourself in a positive way, not in a resistance to change sort of way, but more of a we have a unique competitive advantage kind of a way. One way to do that is to deploy custom software that's harder for others to replicate. Now, custom development still has somewhat of a negative connotation with a lot of the clients we work with. Certainly in the ERP software community, it has a negative connotation because if you're selling ERP software, the refrain is, why in the world would you go develop your own software when we have software over here that can contain best practices and help you run your business? As I mentioned, there's a lot of limitations to that model, especially as we make this movement more towards the cloud with less flexibility, et cetera, et cetera. So now organizations are looking at ways that they might develop their own software. And the good news with custom development is that it's not like it used to be where you've got to start from scratch and write a Java application from scratch. Now you have other ways to do custom development and potentially take advantage of newer technologies that are out there that weren't around during the last movement towards custom development. Now we have platform as a service. So you've got applications and technologies out there that give you a common tool set and a common platform that gives you some off-the-shelf capabilities, but it's more of an off-the-shelf tool set to build your own applications rather than off-the-shelf applications that are pre-configured with standard workflows, et cetera. So that's the first thing, is platform as a service, or PaaS, P-A-A-S is what it's called in the industry. You also have a number of software vendors that are providing not only ERP or enterprise technologies applications, but they're also providing a platform to build on those applications or to extend the applications or to modify the applications from the way they were built off the shelf. So for example, Salesforce and NetSuite are both two examples. Microsoft Dynamics is another, where these three vendors, as three examples, have created a platform on top of their application that allows customers and third-party developers to now create applications in that same tool set, in that same platform, in a way that integrates with the core ERP system and allows you to change the software and customize the software without breaking it in the way that you used to have to go back and change source code and find yourself in a situation where you couldn't upgrade. So now the extensions and the capabilities of these applications have made it a lot easier for custom development. And then, of course, there's the whole vibe coding movement, or the movement towards using AI tools such as Claude to help you write code or to create applications without even knowing how to code. So that, to me, is a real game changer as well, and that will likely create a whole plethora of opportunities for organizations to do custom development. Now, there is a dark side to custom development. First of all, just because you can custom develop something doesn't mean you should. If there's something available that's off the shelf that's just as good, maybe even better than what you can build yourself, it may make more sense to go buy that application. It also creates a dependency on your internal IT staff that you may or may not be comfortable with. If your people retire or leave the company, it might be difficult to find someone who can maintain and support that software, those custom applications going forward. And then finally, it creates technical complexity. IT staff are generally going to feel more pain and more of a workload when you've got custom developed applications, whereas when you buy off-the-shelf software, you're essentially outsourcing the technical aspects of application development and maintenance to a third party. Not necessarily a good or bad thing. Your IT staff may or may not be happy with that, but as a business, that's something you need to consider as far as what the trade-offs are. So that is the advent of custom development. And now what I want to do is talk a little bit about hybrid options that may make sense for your organization. Now, I've talked about the pros and cons of off-the-shelf software. I've talked about the pros and cons of custom developed software, but there's a third option here that's worth considering, and that is a hybrid of options. And this is essentially taking the best of both worlds. If you can start with off-the-shelf software for your core functionality, your basic vanilla processes, that can be a good way to start. It may be that you build custom developed software on top of that to address some of the complexities of your business, the unique aspects of your business, and or the competitive advantages that you have. So I'll give you an example. If you're talking about setting up your GL and doing financial reporting, that may be better suited for off-the-shelf software. If you're talking about a complex order configuration process that your salespeople can use to develop estimates for customers and ultimately sell complex products to customers, that may be something that you want to build some sort of an extension or build some sort of competitive advantage via custom developed software. And again, it may be something that you do not from scratch necessarily, but you could build those custom developments either within an existing platform that you might have within your ERP software vendor, if you're using like a Salesforce or a NetSuite or a Microsoft Dynamics, for example, or it could be that you go buy a platform as a service tool set that allows you to build these capabilities and then ultimately integrate them back to your core ERP system. So this decision of build versus buy is not necessarily an all or nothing proposition. You have options, you can do a hybrid, and the key here is to really think objectively about both sides of the equation. Because if I'm trying to sell you ERP software, which I'm not because we don't sell software, but if I were, I'd probably try to convince you that custom development is a bad idea. If I provide custom development software services, which I don't because I don't sell that either, then I'd probably try to convince you to build your own software because you can do so much more with it. The reality is there's going to be pros and cons to either side, and you've got to look objectively at what makes the most sense for your organization. So ultimately, this comes down to addressing your business strategy, which has nothing to do with build versus buy. Now we're just looking at ensuring that we understand what goals and objectives we're trying to accomplish with technology, and we prioritize those goals and objectives, and then we define the strategy that's going to make the most sense for our organization. And again, it's probably not just going to be one or the other. It's probably going to be some sort of combination of all the options I've talked about here today. But that's the key here, is to not start with a purist or a dogmatic view of how technology should be approached, but instead view it from a pure business perspective, knowing that your technologist in your organization may not like it, and that's okay. They don't have to like it, but if it supports your overall business goals, it may be worth taking on the added cost or the added complexity that may be imposed on your technology group. And same with your business. Your business may not like using off-the-shelf software because it's not as flexible as they may like, but if it drives the business goals and objectives you're trying to accomplish, then perhaps it does make sense. So if you'd like to learn more, though, about some guidance on how to define the right roadmap for your organization, I encourage you to check out our Lessons from 1,000 ERP Implementations book. You can find that for free on our website by scanning the QR code right here or go to the links below. that contains a number of lessons learned from having helped so many different organizations throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. So I hope you found this information useful, and I hope you have a great day. In the buy side of custom. And finally, one other disadvantage of now if I could just say what I'm thinking. And finally, one other disadvantage of
It's cost.
it's just cost, okay?